Hi everyone, this is Kyle with kayDbait. I wanted to make a video on something it's a nuance related to religious teaching, and this is based off of a few things that I've seen in the past where people are talking about the Islamic faith, Muslim faith, versus Christian faith, where people say that Christians are inherently peaceful because of the teachings of Jesus, and Muslims are inherently not because the teachings of Muhammad being more about not peaceful things. There are differences, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on the Quran or any of the religious texts besides the Bible, the Christian Bible, which I read a lot of, but that's not the point of this video. I'm talking about the nuances of how it's taught. Now, I've talked to people that have read the Quran or any of the other religious texts, and they've had very different viewpoints based off of how it was taught to them. Now, some of them were saying it's all about this, or it's all about you see a comment section and there's just very different kinds of people. They have the same information, and they just have completely different ideas of what it means. It's the value system. It's really your internal, the way you analyze and internalize different information. So when I talk to these people, or when I see these comments, it's about how it's taught, with the messages that are presented in it. The text itself doesn't change unless you go off of the different, like, there's 1,000 different translations of, the Old Testament and the New Testament, and people use King James Version, but that's not the original one. The original one was in Aramaic, but in Hebrew. But so there are different variations. But that's not what I'm talking about either. I'm talking about it's really hard to explain nuance sometimes, especially when I'm not 100%. I keep thinking about things and then I'm trying to explain it all, and it's just really difficult sometimes. But if you're taught in a universal kind of bring everyone together kind of way, like Jesus is all for family and for community and for giving, and if that's what you teach, then that's what people will learn when they're young. But if you teach the vengeful, angry God, or the idea that this is the only way to be good, and that's a dividing factor, then they'll start to see it as the people that aren't this way are bad. So you have, and there's different ways of them interpreting what you're trying to teach. So there is a give and take to that, and you can't see my hands, but there's a give and take to everything. So it's not only the person teaching it and how they're teaching it, but also the person you're teaching it to in their life as well. So some people will just not believe that harming people is ever right, but some people will believe that it is, even if you try to teach them otherwise. So you can't base it just off of one instance. You have to base it off of, a lot of data. So when I see people saying that, Muslims are not peaceful because their religion itself, that their laws are based, because it's a theocracy, their laws are based off of, that would inherently make their culture more violent. And I do agree that their laws are more ancient, where some of the countries still do have stoning to death and forcing women to pretty much be objects of their husband's property. I do believe that those are wrong, and they are, dehumanizing, and that they shouldn't be done. But that's based off of, logic and reason of equalities. Just people shouldn't be treated less than others. And violence is not the answer, stuff like that. So those are my beliefs. But when somebody says, and I keep getting around this and I'm trying to focus on it, when people get angry at a religion because of something that their religion has done, whether it be the Crusades, from the Catholic Church murdering a lot of people, or 9/11 attack, which was, Muslim extremist people, or just anyone that's hurt anyone in the name of religion. Those people are not representing the religion. Those people, well, they might have in that era, or they might have in that area that of their influence. That doesn't equate to the whole thing. Apparently, and I don't know this for a fact, but it does seem that a lot of the stuff that's in, all the different Bibles, the different religious Bible texts, are very similar. Like they're based off of the same people. Muhammad is in the Bible and in their Bible, and they're all over. So it's supposed to be the same people, slight variations in the stories. It's the way they're taught. And a lot of people say that, this is they give little passages of what is in their little books. And I don't know if there's more than one version of theirs. I know there's a lot of different versions of as I said, the King James Bible is just one. I don't know if there's variations to theirs, but I do know that they're taught differently. There's always going to be different ways of teaching these things, whether it be through family or through a community, because their communities are very spread out. They're everywhere. I mean, there is no one church. Like, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of churches everywhere, and you can call them mosques or you can call them whatever you want. But they're going to teach them in different ways. So, while it might not be a different denomination, it still might have the person teaching it have a different viewpoint of what something means. And interpretation has always been a part of this. And a lot of people will say, you can't interpret. It's just fact. It's just there, and you must just obey or whatever. That still doesn't make sense, because you have to have a context, and the context is how you interpret it. So no matter how literal you take the texts, you still have to interpret it. So people that deny interpretation as being a factor are misleading themselves as well. They're lying to themselves. You will always interpret things through your perspective. So to try and explain this in the way that actually makes sense, because I'm going all over the place, when you have a group of people that act violently based off of their religious beliefs, you can argue that their religious beliefs are inherently violent. You can look at it and say, well, right here it says to do what they did, or right here it said in this way, that the way they're presenting it is a call for violence against X, Y, and Z. And you can point at those and say, yeah, that is wrong. But all the Bibles I've ever seen have had stuff like that in them. All of them. And I've pointed this out several times to people, and they usually get really mad at me. It's like, if you interpret this the way it was explained to me when I was young, it's a call for violence. My mom, I've said this before, she was completely insane. Not to the point of being violent, but of the point of justifying immoral acts for the sake of her own gain, to the point of violence. I've never seen her actually be violent. But she made it clear that if push came to shove and she wanted something, there was wiggle room there. So that in itself is like, you can look at any text and pull violence from it. Any text. You can read Dr. Seuss and say, well, right here it's justifying this because, whatever. You can always, what was that one? It was about the toast. Which side do you butter the toast? And it was a war. Like, a lot of Dr. Seuss's books, actually all of them were political, very, very political. So you can pull things from there. It's like the Mein Kampf thing. So there's, I shouldn't compare Dr. Seuss to Mein Kampf, but any text you can just interpret the way you interpret it. So when you say, oh, ISIS is using the Quran improperly, or they're using whatever text that they're finding wherever they're finding it, because a lot of the stuff they say doesn't add up to what people who actually believe that religion say. So there's there's like, well, these people are saying this and these people are not saying this. So I don't know where they're getting their information from. It seems like they're just being taught wrong. So when I see a comment that says their religion is inherently violent, or their religion should not be treated the same as other religions because it calls for violence, and I respond to that and say, ours calls for violence if you look at it the same way, because it has been used that way in the past. It has been used that way in the current, right now. The Westboro Baptist Church is a really good example of how not to interpret them, the Bible. Or theirs is nonviolent protest, but they still destroy lives for their own benefit. They're just being non-physical about it. They're doing it emotionally, they're doing it financially and politically as well. And they're doing a terrible job at it, but they're still destroying people's lives when they're at their most vulnerable. So no matter how you see the religion, you have to understand that the interpretations of those are individual of it. The teachings themselves are the teachings. The text is the text. And anyone can pull anything from any of them. So I do not believe I know enough about any of the other religions to really comment about how violent it can be justified or how easily it can be justified. For one, it's in another language. And two, it's written a long time ago, and I don't know if I would be able to understand it properly, even if it was translated. It's like trying to read Dracula, the original story. I tried reading that, and it is difficult, and it is not that old. It is pretty old, but it's so hard to read. So wrapping my head around it's difficult. If I had somebody that was an expert on this, I would love talking to them about this. But I have to explain, I have to just reiterate this. The Muslim faith, the information that I have gotten from people that practice it and that know about it more than I do, have stated that these people that are terrorists do not share their faith. They are not being religious. They're using it as a recruiting tool and a justification for their actions. They were already violent. They were already angry. They grabbed onto this, and now they're using it. It has nothing to do with, God or faith or anything like that. They're using it, and it's some of the other people that they're recruiting believe in what they're doing is right. Infidels for God and for all those things. They're being used. They're tools for the program that is being run to destroy their enemies. And that in itself is another layer of going against what their faith is supposed to present. So all the things I've heard is Christianity and just the Islam belief systems. I don't see much difference in them. I see very different cultures. I see very different perspectives on the world, but the core beliefs of it, what it teaches, the most basic ones are, be gracious to what God says. And because I don't know enough about it, I've only gone from the minimum quotes that I've seen, is they're almost word for word the same in that manner. When it's be good to each other, be kind to each other, be graceful in the eyes of what God believes. And I am not a religious person. I will never pretend to be a religious person, and I'm not going to try and push any religious beliefs on anybody. But when you have two groups that are fighting, because we are a Christian nation, that is what we have as the basis of the United States. And we try to divide it. There is a division legally, but politically, they're almost all Christians in leadership. And that's not a secret. Everyone knows that. And I'm not saying all of them, but I'm saying a vast majority of them. And so we are a Christian nation fighting a Muslim nation, an Islamic nation, a nation of a different religious base that is actually more more their religion than we are ours. Theirs is actual theocracy. Their holy book is their law. So when we pull that in as the main focus of action is their religion, we are kind of, how do I put this? We're trying to keep it separate. We're saying, oh, Christians are different, inherently different than Muslims. And I have to say, well, we're not. What you're doing is you're taking the extremist interpretation and not understanding where that's coming from, and then taking your view of the Christian belief system that you know and have either studied or lived with yourself and compared those. So you're comparing the worst of the worst to your core value system, and that's not fair. It simplifies and it divides greatly, because if you look at the average person that believes in the other religions around the world, you will not find a great difference in them. They're still people, and religion can be a major factor in how somebody believes the world works. Like, they can believe that being a good person will reward you in the afterlife, or maybe reincarnation, maybe in spirituality in the earth, maybe they're Norsemen and they believe that dying in battle is great, or whatever. People will have a different kind of lifestyle based off of that if it's an important factor. But you can't judge an entire group of people that share the culture and, you know, the nationality of this religion, and just slap all that together onto it and just call it a day. It simplifies, and it's not fair. So I know this isn't the best explanation, but you have to not take the worst caricature of your enemies and just put it on everyone there. And I'm trying to use hand gestures, and I'm failing because I'm not in this shot, but you can't just do that, because it's not an accurate depiction of who these people are. And I watched a few videos on it earlier, and it bothered me that there are people that want to turn away the Syrian refugees, for example. This is just an example. This isn't the whole argument. They want to turn them away because they're Muslim, not because of any other reasons. Like, they don't belong here. Bring in the Christians. If there's Christian refugees from that country, let them come in. And that is wrong, because you're saying, well, their culture doesn't matter, their nationality doesn't matter, their person doesn't matter. It's only about their religion because they fear their religion. And again, that's taking the extreme caricature of the terrorists and using it as a reason to fear the average person that is not that. So that's the issue I have. That's the main thing that I wanted to talk about, is that difference. You have to see it. Otherwise, you're not taking into consideration that these are people. You're just saying Muslim, Catholic, okay, you're good. And just letting the rest of them just rot. You don't care. And when you don't care, you don't see them as human, then you, the person judging them, is the one that is wrong. So that's what I wanted to say about this. I'm going to make another video right after this about something else I recently read that I was going to talk about in this one, but ran out of time. This is too long already. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was informative, and I hope to see you in the next video, and peace.